Hello folks, hope you're having a great day today. Today I'm going to take a look at the last and the final story and that I'm going to be looking at today. I have sat down and read 5 short stories in this Zothique cycle by Clark Ashton Smith. Now Clark Ashton Smith was this pulp writer who was writing at the same time as many of the pulp writers of the day in fantasy and science fiction and so forth. And the bulk of his output writing was from 30 to 35. When he was writing fiction, trying to make it work as a writer. Before that he wrote, and after that he wrote a lot of poems, poetry, prose, as well as plays. He also did sculptures, art, and other things like that. So he was kind of involved with art from a lot of different things. He really only has a 5-year output, but that 5-year output was big. He wrote tons of stories. Tons of stories came out, and he was one of the big 3 for the Weird Tales magazine, for example, among other things. And what he would do is he would write numerous worlds, and he would have his various stories that were kind of set in these worlds. And his world here is the Zothique world. And so we're going to take a look at one of the stories in this, and that is basically, this I think is a particularly interesting story. It's called The Witchcraft of Ulua. And I'm assuming I'm pronouncing Ulua correct. It's U-L-U-A. I assume that's Ulua, but if it's not, if somebody wants to correct me in the comments below, it's fine. But The Witchcraft of Ulua, and I think one of the things I'm actually going to take a little bit more of a deep dive into and unpack, because I think that this is actually a little different than the normal Zothique cycle story. In Zothique, because it's far into the future, much like Jack Vance's Dying Earth or something similar, everybody's become more decadent. They're just looking out for themselves. They're evil. You'll oftentimes have stories where evil is fighting against evil. As a good example of that is the Dark Eidolon, which I read earlier today and actually reviewed for you earlier. So you can take a look at that as a good example, where everybody's bad, everybody's evil, and so forth, and you're not really rooting for anybody in that story. And that's actually true. Even your protagonists tend to be people that are not nice people. And this, I think The Witchcraft of Ulua is, I think, very interesting, because this is probably the only example I could think of off the top of my head that's actually different, where you actually have good people that are trying to help each other. So I think that makes this, I think, particularly interesting, and so forth. So we'll take a kind of look at it, kind of deep dive into it. But again, that's kind of Zothique for you, and so forth. Clark Ashton Smith will regularly start his stories without a first act. He's just going to get you started right on into it. He's not going to spend a whole lot of time world building or getting you into the characters or caring about that sort of thing. He's just going to get you started to the big stuff. For example, he has a short story in this earlier that we reviewed that actually started on the first page with the death of everybody in a city, based off of some sort of a disease, and you're going to follow the one character who survived and his slaves. And that's one example of a story that starts kind of in the second act. And this one doesn't. It's about 15 pages kind of in my collection. It took me about 45 minutes to go back and reread. It's about three minutes a page, which is a little bit longer than normal for normal reading, but Clark Ashton Smith is a denser writer. He will regularly use words that he had one of those perfect memories from reading things, and so when he was a child, he read the dictionary and he read multiple volumes of encyclopedias. So as a result, he retained that knowledge even when he was writing, decades later. And now when he's writing this, he's deep into his career, because he's already published as a poet, 15, 20 years ago. So now he's been publishing poetry, publishing prose poems, publishing plays and so forth for a while now, before he kind of turns to fiction and prose full time. So so he's kind of developed his style. It's very distinct and very strongly his. Now he'll sometimes have some purple prose and such that you'll be a little bit like, Like, for example, in this story, he'll use the word cyclopean, which is very common. I can't remember the last time I read an H.P. Lovecraft story that did not use the adjective cyclopean at least once, oftentimes 4 or 5 times in a sentence, or well, more like a paragraph or a page, but you get the idea. He loved that word. And so there are some words like that you're kind of like, it's a little purpley, come on now. But again, that was also very popular in the pulp era too. It was very lush, very lurid, and about that sort of things. But one of the things I like about this story is that, again, it plays against sort of the narrative that we've been building up with Zothique. And that is, again, that these people are out for each other, they're evil and such. But these characters aren't. Well, some of the characters he's going to be going up against, namely the Witchcraft of Ulua, Ulua will be. But basically, you're gonna start with this wizard who's in his 90s, who has considered to be very, very strong as a wizard, as he's kind of a hermit. and he's also very sort of wise, strong. He's not selfish, and he's also considered to be very sort of honorable and religious. So he has this sort of hermitage that he has, where he lives kind of in the sands, and people from the local area will come visit him and ask him for advice. Now increasingly, because as he's getting a little older, he wants to spend more time talking with the sands, the stars above him, or his trees than he does the people that are coming and talking to him. So he's increasingly not going to talk to people that ask for just little advice and so forth. But the main character of our story is going to arrive, and he's this young man in his early 20s, just finished his education and so forth. He's actually family. He is the son of this man's favorite, of our wizard's favorite niece. So because he's family and so forth, and he looks, this guy who's coming in looks like her and so forth, a spitting image of her and such. He will give him all his full answer. So what's happening is that our main character, who's going to be this young man, he's going to be going to the capital of a city far, far away as the cupbearer for a king that's there. And it's a high honor that a lot of people had to kind of give. And he's this kind of local kid from the far-flung Providence and so forth. He's been raised. Our wizard says that he's going to be too innocent to realize what he's walking into. That going into the capital and the hub of one of the cities of this day and age is not going to be, in Zothique is going to be it's going to be debaucherous, lecherous, everybody's going to be out for themselves, it's taking things from each other and so forth. So he advises him to say, hey, look, if you come across something that the magic I'm about to give you is too much for and can't handle, come back, we'll get you taken care of. But here, in the meantime, he's going to give him the silver pendant. And the silver pendant has kind of the martyrs, this old martyr's ashes in it. And this was a martyr who was a strong person who was a strong archmage and martyr, and religious figure who was able to control himself and his own vices and desires and so forth, and by doing that, unlock his power and potential. So he has this martyr's ashes on in a silver pendant around his neck. He's told never to take it off, and that will remove all the sort of temptations that he may undergo while he's there. So he arrives. His family kind of gave him this sort of kings and are divine and have the right to be, and so they have the right to be kind of the odd and weird and bizarre, whatever. You're just going to follow them. And so he has kind of this old school kind of feel for that. So he arrives. He's very loyal as the cupbearer to this new king and so forth. And the king is older. He drinks a lot. He's married to this woman, and then this woman and him. He has a daughter who's about probably maybe a year or two older than our hero, and she is kind of the palace woman she's regularly seducing the men that are there, that are loose and so forth. She's a strong sorceress and has very powerful sorcery and so forth. And our cupbearer is going to be there. He's going to do a lot of things. And because he's never going to be sort of drinking the alcohol or anything like that, he's never tempted to, he won't take a lot of the sort of drugs and so forth that are there. He's never tempted to do that. He just serves the king loyally and so forth. And when he's not working, he's focusing on his studies. He's studying math, he's studying writing, he's studying literature, he's reading and so forth. So he's continuing his studies. So he's he's devoted both to this king, even in the middle of all of this. And so the king's daughter, Ulua, tries to seduce our main hero, and our main hero says no, because he's not. His pendant is keeping him from being seduced by her and so forth. He's not really attracted to her and such. And then what's going to end up happening is she's not going to be comfortable taking that for a no. And so as a result, what's going to wind up happening, of course, is that she's going to use a number of different means at her disposal to try to eventually get this guy to say yes. And so, she doesn't want to have somebody in the court that's saying no to her, and so forth. So she's going to start using sorceries, poisons, love potions, and so forth, and we'll try to bring him around to her own attentions, because she doesn't want anybody in the courtroom to not be somebody that she can seduce and can control as a result. So that's kind of the story, where about halfway mark, and that's where we'll stop it. Again, it's going to go to a fun place. The place actually is a typical fantasy place, but it's not normal for Zothique because, again, Zothique isn't about good people helping each other out. And then our main character is actually genuinely good. He's looking out for other people. He's more innocent. He's very innocent. He's this innocent Earl guy who kind of still believes in helping people and so forth and such. And so... but obviously by the time the thing is over with, he won't be. So it's kind of, if you want to see the growing up of this character. But again, this is very interesting because, again, it's very different than your normal character. Because here you're actually being portrayed with this young guy who still believes and still was trained by his people that you need to help each other out, that, you know, the people matter, helping people matters, and so forth. And so he's not your normal Zothique protagonist, which I think is actually refreshing, that Clark Ashton Smith will write against the grain and show you some characters in his world that aren't the normal stereotypical characters from his world. And I like that. I think that's pretty cool. Ulua is, her dad is. People in the court are definitely typically Zothican, but this guy isn't. And I think that's interesting, and I enjoy that Clark Ashton Smith did that. So I'll pause here. Did you read it? What did you think of it? Did you agree with my assessment that this is more different, and by writing against the grain in this world, I think you get some more interesting depth to it. Did you agree or disagree with that? If there's anything else you want to talk about, I'd be happy to talk with you about it in the comments below. I'm going to keep it relatively spoiler-free in the video, but I'm happy to also engage you with any spoilers you want to down below in the comment section. Additionally, hey, if you enjoyed this, feel free to hit that subscribe button. There's going to be a lot more reviews to follow. I try to review a lot of forgotten classics in fantasy, science fiction, and horror. So this, set in the 30s, is definitely a forgotten classic by a forgotten writer who wrote 2 of those genres. And then finally, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day, because we all have these busy days, busy lives that are jam-packed with so many different things. So the fact that you spent some time with me, it's humbling, and I really do appreciate that. So thanks again.